The story begins with a guy asking to kill him. Because he is given 60 to 70 years to improve his skills, but it was all very samey and boring, so his goal was to die. This is all the fault of his ill-conceived system. He was completely serious when he said that he wanted to be finished. His companions at first watched him very carefully and did not understand what he was talking about. But then they calmly answered that they would not listen to him and do it. The guy grabbed the knife and started screaming. He said he wasn't going to beg her on his knees. One of the people present said that there was no point in killing him because he was a loser. He undressed, put his belongings very neatly next to him and begged on his knees to kill him. No one responded to him and he got dressed and resigned himself to the fact that his request would not be fulfilled. Usually, this happened in different ways. One of them is when some kind of horned animal is launched at you. And you just stand there and wait for him to run to you. He also liked it when various poison drinks were prepared for him. Although he pretended that it was very scary and he did not deserve it. But in fact he drank these drinks with pleasure because he liked to die. As a result, this most often happens with the help of various spirits and monsters. Some options were completely ineffective, such as cattle attack. Before the execution, all the enemies begged for mercy, except for this boy. In the next life, he could sleep with someone he couldn't in the past. But why did everything happen the way it did and death became a common thing for him? It was all because of his stupid system. Although it can protect his soul, it has a limit. The worst thing is that he has to live a miserable life for 60 to 70 years to develop his powers. It was so necessary for him and no one else needed it. His main goal for each subsequent life is to die beautifully. The man always stayed in the office after work. To finish all your work and get a higher salary or bonus. But his body was already refusing to function normally from such a load. And one day he just moved from his workplace to the floor. He tried to get up, but his hands were shaking from any strain. The man blew himself up with the last of his strength and said that he could not let his work go to waste until he was done. After these words, he again found himself under the table from impotence. And this time all the energy left him and he couldn't get up. His face looked as if 10 people had beaten him and mocked him. His eyes were like those of a dead man or a terminally ill person. This man's name was Yuli and he died due to overwork. But he immediately came back to life. That is, he was reborn. And inhabited the body of a young guy whose name was Frey. Frey's father was attacked by beasts and killed while hunting in the mountains. Frey was completely dependent on his father, so he was just desperate. And it was at this terrible moment in his life that he took up residence in his body. The most tragic thing in a person's life is when he dies without spending the accumulated wealth. The only thing Frey needed at that moment was a few pieces of meat. He was very sorry for all the money he had collected all his life. But he could not be sorry at all, because the chance to live a new life was much more valuable. Now he has a new task. To think how to make this life much better than the past. While the boy was thinking about his next actions. And he was ready to start a carefree life in the village. Before him, the system of ascension of Christians appeared and was activated. He was blinded by the light from her and he had never experienced anything like it. He began to listen and heard that it was a system. Frey felt like the main character. He planned to use this system to take over the world. And make himself a harem of 8,000 beauties. These short stories that he read did not lie to him. Further along the plot, he will inevitably reach the top. Frey decided not to waste time on banal things. He stood and spread his hands before the system and said that he accepted it. But the system noticed that the host is struggling and does not meet the system requirements. And it temporarily turned off. The guy started shouting and asking her to turn on. He also didn't understand what it meant that he didn't meet the requirements and asked to be more specific. A red sign was displayed on the system, indicating that it was locked. The system asked him to complete an unmotivated and ordinary life to prove his abilities. And the system will be activated in his next life. He did not understand what kind of ordinary life we were talking about. And what kind of next life the system was talking about. And in general, what is all this for? An unreal force descended from the sky. And this flow of energy descended to the ground and attacked the boy. He was thoroughly roasted and the system warned him that it was forbidden to say bad things about her. She then sent a notification that he was asking too many questions and asked to refer to the user manual. Frey tried to understand. That is, if he ends his life, then in the next he can be invincible. But not taking into account the requirements of whether he will remain himself in the next life. The system said that his soul was archived and when reincarnated, this system preserves his memories. Whatever happens, his soul is already immortal. Any attack that tries to kill him will be doubled, come back to his opponent and kill him. But if this is true, then he will have to live another 40 to 50 years before he can move on to the next life. This infuriated him because it was the only way to live this life. Frey asked the system if he decided to kill himself would it count as living his life. And if he could then activate the system. A true Christian would not dare to die in this way. Normal people seek good and try to avoid evil. If his own actions lead to his death he will not meet the conditions to activate the system. The conditions were clear enough. He would not be able to find death himself, but he could let death find him. Frey wanted to ask one last question. What was his current personality? Frey or Yuli? The system replied that his personality was considered a physical body, which is Frey. He promised to work hard to live the life of a Christian. Frey meant to become someone. Because a real Christian will not work hard. He was upset that he would have to live this life without interest. The system wished the boy success in becoming a Christian. If he still has questions, he can consult the system. After these words, she finally disappeared until the next call. After this conversation, the guy stood for a few minutes and thought about everything that was happening to him. He couldn't believe that such a thing was even possible, but it was a fact. The system was powerful enough and it was unexpected. So the life of Frey is a Christian, but what does it have to do with him, Yuli? He realized that in order to enter the next life as quickly as possible, he has a goal in this life. To find an external way that meets the limitations. So that he could peacefully fulfill his purpose without disturbance and die to get a better life. The following actions take place in the demonic school. Sectarians receive a blessing from the saint. They all worshipped her and wished to live forever and protect them from evil spirits and demons. She took out the orb and said that it was a very powerful weapon left by the ancient monarchs. With it, their sect would be able to rise to the top of the demonic schools. The crowd continued to chant her name and call her an almighty saint. At that moment, a great wind arose and a whirlwind began. The almighty saint was thrown aside by a powerful flow of energy. She realized that someone had stolen the sphere from her, but she could not fully open her eyes to see. She was a beautiful girl with long legs and white hair. Her eyes looked very kind. But was it really so? The saint saw this girl and recognized her. She caused her anger. This girl has come to reclaim this realm. She asked to catch her if she wanted to try to get the sphere back. The saint called on all her assistants not to let her escape, to catch her and bring her to her. In the middle of the forest stood a lonely house, which was covered by sunlight. It had an open window to let fresh air circulate through the house. Frey lived there. He was lying and looking at the ceiling and thinking about something. He understood that it would be difficult for him to die without breaking the rules of the system. He would have to be very careful. Since the moment of rebirth, Frey has not eaten anything. Therefore, he was very hungry. His stomach began to spasm and sweat poured down his face. It was hard for him to think, but dying of hunger broke the rules. But how could he find food in the mountains and forests? Only hunting. And then a wonderful thought came to the boy's head. Since he was in the mountains and forests, he is a guy who spent every day at the table. How should he know how to hunt properly? He needs to learn to live in such a place, but it was very difficult. Moreover, there are so many dangers in hunting. For example, you can crash to death or be eaten by animals. He hoped that not even a week would pass when he would follow the path of Frey's father. The plan was ready, so all that remained was to implement it. He went outside and wandered through the forest to find beasts of prey. Frey hoped he wouldn't even have to wait a whole week. A horned bull was running at him and the boy did not move so that he could hit him accurately. The boy was already thinking about how he would be reborn as a king very quickly. He stood still until the last moment of collision. His horns were already almost at Frey's face. All that remained was to wait for the reincarnation to begin. But before the collision, the boy's hands automatically went up. He could not control them and they themselves took the bull by the horns. The boy tore the buffalo off the ground and threw it over him. Frey threw him all over the forest until he finally lost consciousness. He didn't understand what was happening and thought it was the muscle memory of Frey's body. As a result, the buffalo was destroyed. The ground under it even cracked from the blows. There were a lot of clouds in the sky, which circled around the sun. The boy was in despair and did not know what to do. He hated the past Frey that he was such a strong hunter. It seems that he inherited his skills. His plan to die in the wilderness was perfect. Did he really have to live in this world for half a century? Frey wanted a stone to fall from the sky and crush him. He stood under his house and complained about the unfair world. And at that moment, something like a burning stone flew from the sky and fell on his house. Frey was shocked and scared by what happened in front of his face. The stone did fall, as he requested, but it fell on his house, not on him. The boy did not think long and ran inside his house to look at what fell on the roof of his house. Due to the large amount of smoke, he could not see anything. Therefore, he began to blindly scatter rubble and think about what he should do next. After all, it was his home, and now he doesn't even have a place to live. When he raked the rubble, at the very bottom, under the boards and beams, he saw something strange. It was the same girl with long legs and blonde hair who had stolen the orb from the saint. Frey wondered who it could be and why she had flown here. After such a fall, she is unlikely to have survived. She was lying without any signs of life. But why did she fall from the sky? And she was armed with a sword. It was unusual. This is a cultivator from Legends. She looked good enough, not bad for a cultivator. But he didn't know if she was alive or dead. The guy decided to quickly check if her heart was beating and put his head to his chest. And he couldn't hear any heartbeat, so he thought she was probably dead. Frey was already thinking about how to bury her or what to do next. But she unexpectedly got up as if nothing had happened. His face could be compared to a stone. He couldn't believe it. Her face was very cute and looked like that of a little girl. But after some time, when he fully realized that she was alive, he began to scream. And he asked her not to think anything bad and he just wanted to check whether she was alive or not. She was silent and said only one thing, that she was in pain. The boy calmed down a little and realized that she did not feel or see anything. While they were sitting in the house, stones started falling on their heads. So Frey pulled the girl out into the street away from the house. He explained that they couldn't stay there anymore because it was dangerous. All he could do was try to heal her wounds. Frey went to find some healing herbs. But the boy understood that he lived in this world for only a few days, so it was a very difficult task for him. He was already going to leave and was choosing a better place, but the girl said that there was no need to do that. The boy could not understand why she decided so. But when he returned, his face was again emotionless. After a second, his eyes just popped out of their sockets and he asked what the girl was doing. She wanted to use her energy to heal wounds. Her skills were sufficiently developed and allowed her to heal. She had medicine for such a case, but her body was very weak. And she wanted to ask the boy to help her apply it. After these words, a red liquid began to drip onto the ground. It was blood coming from Frey's nose. After he saw it, his blood pressure went up a lot, causing it to bleed. The girl said that cultivators don't care about such things and gave the boy medicine. The guy considered her very brave and dared to help her. He began to anoint the wounds with her healing water. Frey had never seen people survive with such wounds. And she had several such wounds and she moved quite calmly. Although she had no strength at all. The boy continued to rub medicine into her wounds. And every time he ran his hand over her wound, it was disappearing. And it doesn't matter what size it was at the beginning. These medicines were very powerful. They were like the treasures of the immortals. After Frey treated all her wounds, he wanted to ask how it worked and what happened to her. The girl began to dress and answered that it was a very long and uninteresting story. She introduced herself as Susie, a cultivator from the sword school. And she sincerely thanked the boy for his help. The girl added to her speech that she was from the Naven school. The guy listened to her completely and did not know how to answer. As a result, he also decided to introduce himself and said that his name is Frey and that he is a hunter. Then the boy immediately asked how it happened that she fell from the sky. Susie said that a few days ago, she found out that the demonic school sect had prepared a plan to stop them. She decided to destroy the demonic guardians. But she was outnumbered and they chased her all the time until she got to this house. And then she fell and destroyed the Frey house. But the girl asked the boy not to worry, because when she returns to her sect, she will ask that he be compensated for everything. The fact that she stood up against an entire sect was already amazing. But the fact that she survived means that she is truly unusual. Frey decided to ask what her next plans were and what she planned to do. She said that the plans of the demonic school were ruined and their artifact was stolen. They will not give up. They will attack again soon, so the girl should hurry back to her sect and report it. During their dialogue, she felt a sharp pain and her eyes increased in size. She turned away from the boy to wipe the blood coming from her nose. Frey said that her wounds were very serious and he believed that she would not survive if she continued on her way. If he can accompany her to the sect, then Susie would be very grateful to him. This surprised the boy and he planned to stay at his place for a few days. She told him to forget about her request because it is very dangerous. Frey decided to ask how far it was from his house to the sect. The girl calmly said that the journey would take about half a month. And the demon sect will follow them. It will be very dangerous and they should be lucky if they can avoid them. The boy had his advantages at the expense of this trip. He asked the system if he died on the road while accompanying the girl, if it would not violate their rules. She replied that although a Christian does not usually aspire to be a hero, it is not against the rules that if misfortune befalls him, he dies helping others. Susie said it was rude enough of her to ask for that kind of help, so she wasn't going to push it. The boy coughed before answering the girl. He said that this would not cause him any problems and he would help them reach the sect without hesitation. Susie did not count on this at all. She thought that he was an ordinary hunter and was afraid to take such a dangerous path. He began to invent heroic speeches. And he said that the girl had done a very good deed for the sake of ordinary people, and now she was left alone against everyone. Although he is mortal, he knows what he must do. He was ready to help her with the demonic cult. Together they will definitely endure and will win. Susie guessed that this guy was lying, but he was kind enough to her. She didn't understand what was going on, but she needed to get to the sect at any cost. She asked if he was absolutely sure of this, but the boy replied that she should be thanked for such an act. Then they would have to try hard. The demonic cult would soon catch up with her and they should hurry. But the boy asked for time so he could pack his things. Frey went to his physical father's grave and said he needed his son's body for a little while, he would let him die and then he could rest in peace. The wilderness didn't kill him, but if he met a few members of the demonic school, death might come sooner than he expected. And so he finally gathered all the necessary things and called Miss Susie. They will go on this journey together, although they pursue different goals. Saint was very angry with Susie, they were preparing to attack her with the whole sect. She cursed the girl for ruining her 50-year demonic sect plan. The saint climbed the mountain to perform in front of her puppets. She promised that she would make her answer for all her actions. Her assistants gathered near their place of strength. And the saint chose one of the elders and called her closer. In appearance, they were very old and incapable of anything. But in reality, they were monsters capable of destroying anything. When he approached, the saint said that he was one of her elite warriors. And she ordered him to follow the elder of the sword school. He had to return the magic artifact of the demonic school that she had stolen. He asked not to worry about the holiday and promised to deal with it as soon as possible. The elder looked up and saw that his mistress had something in her hands. Saint asked him to give his best. Because Susie is very strong and you can't relax for a minute with her. And just in case, she gave him the most powerful thing. At first the elder did not understand what she meant. And then he saw it with his own eyes and was shocked. He couldn't believe that she was entrusting him with this powerful weapon. But the woman replied that she would only give it to him for a while. And if he can kill Susie, she will reward him very handsomely. The elder listened to her, bowed and thanked him very much for his trust. Susie was not only badly injured, but also imbued with their energy, which makes it possible to track the location of her soul. It was already dark and it was necessary to form a camp for the night. They lit a fire among the 3 trees and Frey went to sleep. Susie was looking for firewood. And when she came, she saw that the boy was sleeping soundly. She came closer and saw that a bubble had blown from his nose. The girl watched him, and then stretched her hand to his neck. To check his pulse, because he looked like he was either fast asleep or dead. She did not stop at the neck itself, so she began to lower her hand down to her chest. The boy enjoyed himself and woke up from this feeling. Susie was standing in front of him, undressing him. He froze in one place. At first the boy thought it was a dream. And his nose began to bleed again due to increased pressure. He did not expect such a development from the girl at all. Maybe she wanted to thank him for saving her. Susie moved to his ear and began to encourage him to take decisive action with gentle words. While they were courting each other, a strange mist appeared above them. The girl stopped abruptly and stood up from the boy. She asked to be more careful because the ecstasy sect was nearby. Frey also stood up and began to scan the area and search for information with his eyes. They heard voices talking about how many there were and tried to make their way quietly to the camp. These people were very careful, they did not come close. But he used the subject of the ecstasy sect's Bear Mountain. When a person is in this fog, his desires and emotions are awakened. The girl told him to look closely and see the red mist. Indeed it was true, it was very bright and dense, like radiation. If all this is really true, then he was attracted by this fog. He read such stories and then seemed to lose himself for a few minutes. The problem was that Bear Mountain worked only on girls. Frey did not know this, but he also showed interest in Susie. The girl bent down in front of the boy and he asked if she was absolutely fine. She replied that she could withstand it for a while. Meanwhile, the sky was filled with stars and the moon illuminated the forest more and more. The guy came up to her and tried to help her get together, but it was useless. Since he couldn't do anything, he didn't know what to do next. The girls said that they only have two options. The first is that she has the trump card, but it will be very risky. Using it will definitely kill their enemy, but can kill Frey as well. He thought that this would be the best way out for him. But Susie said she didn't think he would agree because she couldn't let the man who saved her die like that. The boy became angry and insisted that she use this power. The second option was that Frey had to find this man and she would kill him. The guy was not ready for such a task and did not know how to look for it at all. He used some magical item to hide his presence. Now she was confused, so she can't find him by herself. And since the boy grew up in the forest, maybe he will be able to find him. Frey began to think about what advantages this would give him, so that he could die sooner. She understood that it was a difficult task, but it was the only way for him to survive. He said that he understood everything and promised to find him. It seems that his time has come and he was ready to meet in the next life. The guy followed where this fog started and went there. Meanwhile, the elder was hiding behind a tree in his invisibility cloak. These clothes, which the saint gave him, could not only save him from the spiritual search, but also hide him from all five senses. Even if they touch him, they will not be able to understand who he is. He planned to wait until the Bear Mountain hit Susie and then he would make his move and kill her. Killing her like this was insulting. If she could gather Een and saturate Yang, it would not only be bliss, but she could also gain Een and accelerate her cultivation. Moreover, she has the treasures of the ecstasy sect. If he can get them from her, maybe the festival will reward him. Then he saw a small hunter passing by. At first the elder thought he had found him. But then he realized that he was just looking for him in the forest. It is simply impossible for a mortal to be able to catch it in midair. Despite this, he manipulates the air currents so that it seems that he is on the other side of them. It's just impossible, and it amused him. But when he turned in his direction, then he saw the arrow of this hunter in front of his face. But at the last moment he was able to dodge this shot. It was so unexpected that even the birds flew from the trees. As a result, the elder was able to avoid this hit. Frey didn't understand how he was able to hit him with the first shot when he was using the invisibility cloak. The elder was confused, his plan was destroyed and the position was exposed. The boy was chastising himself for hitting this elder. He really wanted to die. A minute ago, the boy was looking for the attacker. If the fog was coming from the north, then his enemy must be there. Therefore, if he shoots to the south, he will definitely miss. The shot has to go past Susie's range of protection, so he decided to shoot at places that weren't covered by leaves or branches. He planned that when he was preparing an arrow, the enemy would appear. And then he will be able to kill him faster without any problems. Frey imagined how he was dying and was happy. The main thing is that this plan worked. But everything turned out differently. His plan was very well worked out, why the enemy was hiding there. It was the only possibility. Now that he had found him, Miss Susie would not let him go alive for anything. He began to run away right in front of his eyes and did not try to attack. But for some reason Miss Susie did not move at all and stood in one place. The boy asked why she didn't do anything and kill him. The girl replied that her injury was still strong. And the attack would only make it worse, so she thought that it would be better to wait until he found the enemy. But she did not expect to find him so quickly. The girl grabbed his arm with both hands. And she began to pull him to her body and to her legs so that he would touch her. She asked him to do it again and now she definitely won't let him go. The guy said he would do his best and asked to wait there. This time the boy was sure that he would not be able to aim at him. Because otherwise his plan will fail again and he won't be able to die. The elder also hoped that the boy would not be able to survive. And he constantly changed his position so as not to fall into a trap. He could not be noticed. But some peasant was able to shoot him the first time. He hoped that the boy would never guess that he was hiding in the past position. Now it remained only to wait how he would catch it. Frey drew his arrow and began to think of where he could hide. He thought that this man was not stupid enough to make a circle and return to his position. This time, he expected to miss for sure. The elder expected further actions from the boy. And logically, he hit him right in the head. Frey could not find words from his aggression and anger. The elder was also shocked. He was again forced to flee and change his position or retreat altogether. The guy turned to the girl and saw that she still didn't have enough time to free yourself from this spell and calm down. The girl said that he did it very quickly, so she can't pull herself together. But she could not wait any longer and decided to overpower herself. She opened her eyes fully and began searching for her sword. Weed was in their camp right next to the fire. The girl could barely stand on her feet and held on to her sword so as not to fall. She said that she would not let him escape again and that the next time he found him, she would kill him. In fact, this situation was in Frey's favor and it was to his advantage that she couldn't kill him. This is another chance for him to die and he begged this enemy not to let him kill him again. Susie's medication will soon begin to work and she will be free from the pheromone effect. This will be his last chance and it doesn't matter if he lives or dies, but he has to try. The boy saw him jump from one tree to another and did not understand where to shoot him. And the elder at that time was thinking about where he should hide. Frey was afraid to shoot because he might accidentally hit the head again. And the enemy thought that this guy was very unconventional and it was dangerous to hide anywhere. The guy had to shoot where he would definitely not hide. And the man had to hide where he wouldn't shoot. The elder jumped on him from behind while he was distracted. But the boy turned and saw him, but did not shoot. This time the arrow flew 2 centimeters from him and it was too late to hide. This bastard actually saw him, although he pretended not to. This boy played with him like a little child. He asked only one person that the arrow did not fly in the face, but no one heard this request. Frey said the man was mad because he jumped right on his arrow. The boy did not understand why this happens, that he always kisses him. Then he thought, maybe this guy also has a system that wants him dead. That's why he throws himself at his arrows. And then Susie finally recovered and began to act as promised. She waited for Frey to find an enemy and activated her powers. The girl was very angry that she was mocked like that. That's why I wanted and longed only for death for this demon. She attacked him with all her might to get revenge. The elder only managed to turn his gaze to the girl. And a huge amount of energy flashed in the sky as if it was a firework. Frey just watched it with his mouth hanging open. It seemed to him something unreal and intergalactic. After her punch, the elder simply fell to the ground like a sack. There was a lot of dust around and it was impossible to see everything in detail. But there was no need for this, because the enemy was destroyed. Frey tried to speak to the elder, but he was already dead. The boy still decided to ask a question that had been bothering him from the very beginning. Why did he jump right at his arrows? He tried to answer something, but he couldn't say a word. The guy asked if he really wanted to die. If so, then, for what? Arteries on his body began to enlarge and tears flowed from his eyes. After that, he vomited blood through the bandages with which he was wrapped. Frey started screaming and said he was bleeding profusely. He asked him not to die and to say something. Because he still had questions. Then the boy saw Miss Susie standing next to him and asked if she was okay. She replied that everything was fine. The ecstasy sect was testing them this time. And next time, they will send someone stronger. There are still many paths and they can choose any of them to reach the sword sect. But how did they know that they chose this particular path? In fact, there was something she didn't say. Because of her injury, she would die if they didn't get there within half a month. There are only 3 paths that will lead them there in this time. The ecstasy sect knew about it, so there was no other choice. If he regrets agreeing, she won't insist that he stay with her and keep going. But he didn't even want to hear that, because he promised to deliver her to the sect and now he can't refuse. In fact, he is ready to be with her until he dies. She grabbed his head and thanked him for saving her. The guy only managed to look away before she pulled him to her chest with force. And she pulled him under her clothes. But the boy said that he could not breathe. He got out of her arms and said that it wasn't very appropriate right now. The girl said that the Bear Mountain was still working for her and asked Frey to go to the forest for a while. She wanted to get rid of her, but it was very inconvenient when someone was around. As a result, the guy left her alone so that she could relax on her own. He promised not to listen or look, but he still heard her moan. Meanwhile, we can see what is happening in the ecstasy sect. The saint held a candle in her hands, which reflected the life of the elder. As expected from Susie. It was a pity that they lost such a valuable artifact. A new challenge awaited her at every patch of the forest and whether she could defeat them just as easily. Although Susie looked like a naive girl, she had a lot of combat experience. The cult of pleasure did not send assassins after them, and they calmly reached their goal. The boy asked if they are going to the sword cult, why are they stopping in Zizan? The girl answered because their people guard the entrance to this town. The cult of the sword was in Sidon's vassal district. Since she is wounded, they will have to go through Zizan to get to Sidon. They studied the map and decided how best to get there. Now that they were close to the sword cult, the boy wondered if the pleasure cult would dare to attack them. If not, he demanded that she kill him with her own hands. The cult of the sword is the largest school, so the cult of pleasure should not challenge them. But the demonic academy will not lose an opportunity to become stronger during this time. And the girl was sure that they would send more mercenaries. Frey hoped that the cult of pleasure would still get to them and kill the boy. His body felt the coolness of their sword. The boy could not calm down because he urgently needed to die. The evening came and they needed to spend the night somewhere to gain strength. For safety, they rented one room for two. But in reality, it did not become safer. And it was very uncomfortable to sleep. It was definitely not about comfort and rest. In the middle of the night, Susie burst out of bed and said that the people of the cult of pleasure were nearby. The boy was frightened and fell to the floor. Blood flowed from his mouth again. Since for some reason he was sleeping hanging on the wall, he was lucky when he fell. He lay on the floor for a few minutes and looked at Miss Susie's feet. She said she could feel them and quickly started dressing. Frey lay still and found her very sensitive to the environment. They were somewhere nearby, because their voices could be heard very well. They threatened to take revenge and said that their hatred knew no bounds. The girl wasted no time and activated her skill of having 5 poisons. She would then imbue her sword with this energy to destroy her enemies. As a result, she was in full combat readiness. Meanwhile, the boy was confused and wanted to sleep very much. He did not understand how the girl identified individuals by voice. Cultivators seemed to him to be amazing people. And suddenly their window opened and they expected to see enemies. Frey grabbed a chair and the girl asked him to be very careful. Then the fighters of the cult of pleasure appeared in the window. One of them said that it was an honor for them that she still remembered their names. They remembered that she killed every poor person. And they never forget those who hurt them badly. For some reason, the girl was confused by their talk about the poor and unfortunate. There were 4 of them and they entered their room without permission. The man reminded her of the mother of 5 poisons who poisoned the river to stop the plague. A faceless monarch who killed people and carved their faces. Shingu who ate children to cultivate his soul. Enjpe, who used ordinary mortals as fodder for shadow monsters. Susie stood in a sheet with a sword and said they were all sinners. Frey listened to all of this and became even more confused about their personalities. The man grabbed his stick and thumped the sky hard on the floor. He believed that mortals were nothing compared to cultivators. He didn't care what she said, but he wasn't going to let her go. The girl asked not to waste time and finally fight. Frey, meanwhile, grabbed a chair and jumped out at these men. But the girl just undressed at that moment and the sheet flew right into his face. He said that you can't undress so suddenly. The guy said that he will fight for her because she is injured. He took care of her and gave her a new sheet and clothes. The old man mocked the boy and did not believe that he wanted to fight with them. If they use all their power, there is no telling how many mortals will be affected. The guy decided to repeat specifically for the deaf that he would fight instead of her. The old man asked the boy if he was sure he could protect his girlfriend. He replied that these are his problems and he will solve them himself. The girl shamed these men and asked why they were doing this. It was simple. If she was willing to pass their test, then they would no longer attack her. Using the soul linking technique, they would make a contract. If either of them broke it, their soul would die immediately. The boy began to demand his money and said that this is real slavery. The old man said that he also works hard to ensure his wages, but no one supports them. Frey asked the girl how many people supported them. She answered that 0. Then the guy understood and hoped for their help and reminded him not to forget to read on their website or he would die of depression. The thieves asked the girl what she thought about this account. Although the 4 of them do not even match her strength, they decide everything that will happen. Susie and Frey stood still and listened to their nonsense. Even an idiot could understand that they were trying to trap him in this way. It was very stupid because no normal person would agree to such terms. But Susie did not hesitate to accept their offer not to fight in the city. Frey leaned over to her and asked her to think again. They were definitely not to be trusted, so it was impossible to agree. She understood everything, but she did not want the inhabitants of this city to die. The guy looked at her and understood why the girl decided to act like that. Then Susie signed a contract with the mother of 5 poisons. If she passes the test, they will never attack her again. If the contract is broken, the soul of the person who is guilty will be destroyed. She signed this contract with her energy. Frey was against it anyway and thought it was a bad idea. And the main thief, on the contrary, was happy that the offer was accepted. The boy did not know how to answer her, but it was already too late. And he decided to try to change something himself and asked to wait. Susie was surprised and did not understand why he was doing this. Their enemies were also confused because this guy was meddling in his own business. He noted that the test and its rules are not prescribed in the contract. Therefore, the task may even be to kill the head of her clan. And what will happen if the poison does not kill her? Or the results will not satisfy them and they will all blackmail her with people's lives. Frey started yelling and said that there are a lot of holes in this contract. Their goal was only to force the girl to sign it. And the boy destroyed this contract. Although his goal was to die, he could not help but intervene when they tried to deceive Susie. If a contract is really needed, he will personally check its integrity and correctness. The old man said that he was a mere mortal and would not dare tell them what to do. Frey continued to shout and said that this old man was scared and was only threatening people's lives. The man at that time urged not to listen to anyone because he was ruining his reputation. The girl understood everything and said that he had no reputation. She set the conditions, either they must replace the contract or there will be a battle. And the girl was ready for the consequences. They started to negotiate and definitely weren't ready to fight because they knew they were going to lose. Maybe they could change the contract and win that way. The thieves began to argue with each other and held different opinions. No one wanted to die and they needed to make a decision. Then they went back to the girl and told them not to worry because the contract would be changed. Frey said that there were some corrections to be made. The test should not exceed their abilities. Also, They should not die or be seriously injured while taking the test. Their confidence showed that they had prepared seriously, otherwise Suzy would not have had to sign it. And after successfully passing the test, they had to go to a deserted island so as not to interfere in the affairs of ordinary people. He understood that it was better not to touch the content of the test so that he could help Suzy and die at the opportunity. The old man understood that the boy had solved them. He wanted to dissuade the girl from signing the contract by all means. They would have to agree to his terms. Because she would not pass the test anyway. He also asked to enter his name next to hers in the contract. The old man promised that he would regret this request. He took into account all wishes and began to create a new contract. After a few seconds, the contract was already ready. But the girl was against the fact that they entered his name in the contract and made him involved in everything. The guy said if the thieves signed it together, then they should too. Suzy did not understand why he wanted to sign the contract so much, because it was very dangerous and his participation was not mandatory at all. Frey understood that this was a death warrant and he must sign it. They began to sign the contract one by one, and the girl could not believe that she had a partner. Because she always worked alone and was not used to this. He was a mere mortal, but he wanted to fight alongside her. But the girl was ready to protect him for such a brave act and his help. After signing, the guy got down on his knees and was ready to do the job. He asked the thieves to show their test assignments. The old man replied that they were prepared for cultivators and it did not apply to ordinary mortals. But the contract had his name on it, so he must pass it. The more they wanted to deceive Miss Suzy, so he would help her. Were they afraid of losing? Suzy stood in one place and did not have time to think about everything they were talking about. The old man was angry that he was so self-confident and began to pull the gray-haired man by the beard. He began to threaten the boy, but the man did not understand why he was being pulled by the beard. The first task for them is called poisoned wine. To pass, they must drink 3 glasses. The gray-haired grandfather said that his test is easier and you just have to play a game with him. The task of their next representative was debate. In another, they had to stay close to the shadow beast for an hour and a half and not die. Frey and Suzy had to choose one of these tasks. The guy started to pick, but the girl grabbed his hand. She thanked him for his help, but it was a game of survival. And she said she could figure it out on her own. He started screaming because he was trying so hard. And she wants to destroy his plans. Suzy said that the boy is very weak and she will not let him die. Frey has forgotten that if he tries to die, the system will count it as an attempt to kill himself. He decided to step aside and ask the system about it. The boy began to call the system to make sure it would be considered an accidental death. He said he decided to sign the contract to take the test and whether it would be considered intentional death if he died. The system responded that it would be considered a heroic act. If death comes unexpectedly, it doesn't count. Now all he has to do is convince Suzy to let him take part in the test. He decided to use his acting skills. Frey said that the girl, like these thieves, thinks he's a weakling and thinks he won't be able to pass the test. She was ashamed, because she did not think so, but simply wanted to save his life. The guy said that he thought they had become friends during this time spent together. And he signed the contract for her sake. But she still perceived him as an ordinary mortal after everything he had done. The guy was desperate and tried to show it with his appearance. Suzy immediately became nervous and thought about how to prove to her that this was a wrong judgment. Meanwhile, their enemies put on glasses and prepared popcorn as if it were some kind of movie. Frey pretended to be very offended by this and his hands were shaking. Then he started squirming the little child and cursing the girl. As a result of this development, the men dropped their popcorn. It was unpleasant for them to look at how the boy climbed up to kiss the girl. She also screamed and asked him not to come closer to her. First, he needed to take part in the test. And of course he wanted to choose the glasses with poison, where there was poisoned wine. It was a quick and efficient way. If it weren't for the rules of the system, he would have just drunk all the glasses. In front of him was a choice and 6 glasses, among which one was definitely poisoned. It was necessary to choose 1 glass from each row and drink 3 pieces. According to the rules, not all the wine was poisoned, so he must choose the right glasses with the help of his skills. The boy planned to choose any glasses, because logically he would not be able to choose all the unpoisoned ones that way. Although he hit that invisible guy with an arrow 3 times, so you have to be more careful. The first glass looked like ordinary water and he saw no difference. He took the first vessel and quickly drank the wine from it. Its taste did not differ from ordinary wine at all. And the other glass looked very suspicious and not standard. The boy began to examine it from all sides in order to make the choice he needed. His legs went numb and so did his hands. Saliva began to flow from his mouth. His eyes began to bleed and close automatically. And after a while, the guy just fell on the floor. Susie ran up to the boy and asked him if he was all right. He was lying on the floor and could not raise his head to answer properly. The old man was surprised by such a reaction from the first sip. He had already forgotten that he was not in his clan and asked him to surrender immediately. But the boy did not give up. The stronger the poison, the easier it will be for him to die. He reached out his trembling hand to take the next glass. But he had not finished drinking the past, but was reaching for the new. While he was trying to take the glass, 1 drop flew out of it. It fell on the table and burned it completely with 1 drop. The guy immediately sobered up and his face became sweaty. He finally found the drink he needed. He grabbed it without a second thought and drank it down in a few gulps. When the guy drank it, he just sat down and started waiting for it to happen. It felt like he had been waiting for 2,000 years. He sat with his eyes closed, then opened them and did not understand why he had not died yet. The old man was surprised that he realized that in this glass there was a drink made from a harmless plant, but very unpleasant. He asked to tell him who taught him this ability. He was very angry and did not understand how a plant can be harmless and so disgusting. How is this even possible? The old man thought that the boy did not want to say who taught him this, so as not to harm the master. He promised not to touch him if the boy told who it was. Frey said he didn't get it right and he didn't have a teacher and didn't study poisons. The old man thought that he simply did not want to tell and decided to close the conversation. In the first round, they made the safe option look the most dangerous. He couldn't believe that the drink didn't kill him. In the next row, he decided to take this point into account and do the opposite. Try the seemingly most harmless drink. But his gut told him. And he seemed to change his thinking and made him look at the situation differently. Of course, this method could not be used, because it would not use the same method as in the first row. Everything should be different. And it was necessary to choose the most dangerous drink at first glance. He looked through each glass and chose a black drink. His left hand reached for the glass by itself. The old man could have planned this and poured poison into an ordinary glass. Although she could predict that he would not be able to choose between 1 and 3. And poison too. He was already getting dizzy from these puzzles. He needed to know exactly where he had poured the poison. It drove him to hysterics and he even began to cry. He hesitated between the glass containing the purple liquid. Or others where there was a liquid that seemed to be carbonated. Or the last place where something black was poured. For some reason, he was sure that the poison was in the glass with the black liquid. But at the last moment he put it back and took another. He still decided that the other 2 were poisoned and therefore it didn't matter which one he drank. Frey was happy that he was able to make such an analysis and choose the poison glass. The old man was again shocked that he was able to choose the only glass in which there was no poison. His master was a real genius. The boy did not have the strength to show how upset he was with emotions. Susie was happy, but did not understand why the boy was upset, because he managed to pass this test. He did not understand why this was happening to him and how it was possible. Frey started yelling at the old man and accusing him of fraud. He replied that the boy was just thinking for a long time, and if it wasn't for the cultivator behind him, he would have killed him 3 times already. Susie was delighted that the boy knew so much about poisons. She believed in him that he would be able to choose the last cup. But he asked not to encourage him and continued to cry. His face was full of despair and he said he would try to make the right choice. The guy noticed that the more he thought and analyzed, the worse the result was. This time he decided to just pick up and drink the green liquid. Frey grabbed the glass and quickly emptied it without hesitation. It was very sweet to him, as if it were a non-fuel mineral. But it was again a glass without a single drop of poison. His eyes were just very wide and he was ready to tear himself apart. His left hand chose the safe liquid each time. But the old man began to shout that this time he drank poison and would surely die. The girl ran up to the boy and offered to finish this test instead of him. He lay on the floor and told her not to touch him and let him die in battle. She reminded him of the past when he was also drained of energy. Frey was ready to die of weakness, especially since this was not the first time for him. A terrible monster appeared in front of him, which was very large. 15 minutes later, Frey was already sitting at the next table and playing a game. He looked badly beaten, but he survived. The old man he was playing with looked at him warily because he had done the near impossible in the last task. The boy looked at him with one eye because he could not open the other due to pain. Frey was forced to breathe through his mouth because that way he could take in more air. Because of the ordeal with wine, he lost a lot of strength and energy. He took out small figures from the basket and put them on the playing field. It was very boring, and during this game it is impossible to die. The old man carefully followed the boy and repeated that he did not have long left. Susie was very worried about her savior and did not want him to burden himself like that. She approached him and asked him not to continue the game yet, but to rest. He yelled at her and told her not to worry because he would manage. The old man who played with him began to doubt that he was an ordinary mortal. Meanwhile, Frey was already lying face down on the floor and his body was trembling. But he wanted to show what the power of mortals is. The boy continued to walk without even looking at the playing field. The man began to lose coordination and lean to the side. His eyes began to roll upwards and his head could not be held. He admitted that he didn't have enough strength to defeat this guy. And as a result, he moved from his place directly under the table. Frey meanwhile got up, but he was also very low on energy. Therefore, he could barely stand on his feet. And it was surprising to him that a cultivator could lose to an ordinary mortal. He would like to rejoice in his victory, but the body refused to function normally. While he pretended to be happy with such a result, he began to feel nauseous. And he began to bleed right at the gaming table. Susie ran up to him and began to help him stand on his feet. The girl asked how he was feeling. The chief cultivator among the thieves did not understand how this was possible. For an ordinary mortal to neutralize the poison and stop the effect on his body. Frey did not understand what he was talking about. Susie at that time was happy that he was able to overcome this poison. This angered the old man. He was not used to being deceived like this. He realized that the boy had foreseen everything. And Frey was just waiting to neutralize the poison. But in fact, this fact saddened the guy the most. Because no one knew about his goal to die. Another cultivator said enough complaining and asked what exactly the boy had done wrong. He replied that he was afraid that he would learn the secret of his game. So when he chose poison, he drank a pyrotechnic meteor. This shocked the man and he was forced to think about how this could happen. But it was an even bigger mystery for Frey himself. This poison was the dignity of his cult, it was ideal. After it enters the blood, a person is overwhelmed with energy. And as a result, the amount of it makes a person tear up. Therefore, during the game, the board absorbed excess energy, which neutralized the poison. That is, the cultivator lost because of the pyrotechnic meteor. Even the creator of this poison did not think that such a thing was possible. The boy listened to all this and could not believe a single word. He wanted to die more for them, but he was very lucky. And it was not clear what this was connected with. Frey said they were mad because he didn't even know there was poison in that glass. No one understood how he managed to come up with it in such a short period of time. The cultivator is more inclined to say that it was luck. Frey overheard their entire conversation and decided to intervene. He shouted that it was really true and it was just a coincidence. Maybe that's true, but then why was he smiling so much during the signing of the contract? But he was also calm, even after drinking the poison. He also asked if there was poison there for sure, and this is very strange. The old man guessed that he just wanted to provoke him. The girl noticed that Frey was coughing up blood again. The cultivators realized that he had revealed their plans. And maybe he was the son of an eternal demonic master. Frey did not know any demon master and tried to prove it with his appearance. Susie was already starting to get nervous herself and various thoughts were running through her head. The boy started shouting and threatening the cultivators. He warned them not to spread rumors, otherwise he would stone them to death. He continued to argue with them and said that this was not his father and that he was not a cultivator at all. His father was an ordinary hunter who knew how to hunt well and everything. But men still found something to cling to. Frey no longer had the strength to prove anything to them. It wasn't even in his interests to prove that he was an ordinary country boy. The old man said that the eternal demonic master was an ordinary hunter before cultivation. He could return to his past occupation. The boy looked like he was 20 years old, and the master disappeared just then. They were sure that it was his secret son born after the disappearance. Cultivators expected him to give arguments or confirm their guesses. Susie had also heard about it for the first time and wanted to know the details. The guy started shouting that it was all a lie and a provocation on their part. He said that his father was killed by a beast. If he was really that cool, he definitely wouldn't have died like that. But for the cultivator, it was, on the contrary, a confirmation. The guy didn't know how he could prove that it was all a lie. He was very angry and started swinging his knife. 20 years ago, the demonic master fought with the master of despotism. It was said that his father lost and was seriously injured. Either he died of injuries or simply became an ordinary mortal. Probably, these rumors really did not lie. Now he has a new task, to convince the girl that it is all a lie. Susie started to take out her sword. He didn't have the abilities of a cultivator. If he was really his father, then why didn't his abilities pass to him? The old man said that everyone knows that it takes 30 years to master his skills. The boy thought and began to combine all the facts that the man mentioned. And is it possible that he really entered the body of a demonic master? But he refused to even think about it, because it was impossible. Frey was his real name, and the old man was trying to confuse him. The main thing was to defend one's point of view. He continued to convince everyone present. And he said that it was impossible to believe in such a thing. The cultivator said if he was really his son, then he should join their clan instead of helping Susie. The girl understood that if he joined them, it would be the end of her life. He no longer had the strength to argue with them. If he disagrees again, this idiot will come up with new arguments again. He was able to neutralize the poison, that is, if Susie decides to kill him with a sword, everything will be great. But if she just beats him, then he no longer knows how to die. There were 2 more tests left and he had a chance to die. Whatever happened to the cult, he didn't care. The boy said that evil comes from the heart, not from the cultivator's abilities. He is a very good person at heart and they are not done with the tests yet. He said that he wants to pass the next test as well. Frey asked the girl if she would believe him if he passed him. She also believed that evil comes from the heart itself. The faceless cultivator said that he was worthy of the title of eternal demonic master's son. The only thing left is the faceless test. He was bad at debate, and it will be even harder to hold on with the shadow monster, so he can die. They understood that he had such a title that he had to sneeze at them. Men waited for his choice and fell on their knees before him. They began to sob and shout that they would obey the master. One claimed that he had fought alongside him, and another said that he was his master as well. And if it turns out that Frey is his son, then they want to surrender to him. Their elder called them cowards and traitors to the clan. But then they also began to cry and apologize for their actions. Susie looked at the boy and did not understand what was happening. Frey said that they had not finished. And he ordered them to get up and continue what they had already started. But they refused and said that they were giving up. He grabbed the two cultivators and told them to release their monster and let it die peacefully. The other two were talking about whether they would survive. The elder understood something and asked Frey if he had found a solution to the situation that would satisfy him. He thought that the boy had signed the contract to kill them and take all their belongings. He was specifically trying to annoy them so that he would kill them for a reason. The girl listened to their speech and told them to stop. And if they surrender, they must fulfill the terms of the contract and go west. They stood still and looked at Susie and were silent. After a second, the thieves already started to run away and told the trail that this is what they expected from cultivator Susie. Although she defeated them, they still did not lose their dignity. Therefore, now they will fulfill their part of the contract, but this was not the end. The guy sat down on a chair and said that they didn't decide anything. And he only got more tired. The girl asked not to behave like that. He either underestimated the mother of 5 poisons or overestimated Susie. Because now she definitely wouldn't be able to defeat them on her own. Frey was very tired and said they needed to sleep. But the girl asked him to wait because they needed to discuss something. The boy and the girl were alone in a dark room. And in such an atmosphere, only one thought was in their heads. But she was just retrieving the orb she stole from the demon clan before she fell on the roof of his house. He asked where she got it from. Susie replied that it was precisely because of this that she was being persecuted by the cult of pleasure. She confessed that she had stolen an artifact of the sphere of sorcery. The orb was the cult's pride that was found in the ancient realm. It strengthened demonic techniques. But the most dangerous thing was that it could corrupt people and make them heartless. If the orb remained with the pleasure cult, they would be able to summon the strongest demon. This pleased the boy and he perceived the artifact as an ordinary toy. She said that there was another soul-devouring flag, but due to some circumstances it was not obtained. Before that, she didn't tell anything, because she considered it something insignificant. It is possible that he could change both her and the boy. Therefore, even talking about him is very dangerous.